We remember. We remember the hatred allowed to thrive unchecked. The ordinary citizens who stood by. Silent, indifferent, complicit. We remember the millions murdered, the dreams destroyed, and futures shattered. Why do we do this? Because if we learn from the lessons of the past, we can build a better, safer, a stronger future for all people. We remember. So the memory of the victims and their stories are not lost in history. And so that generations from now, no one can deny what happened. It is up to us to bear this memory.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum and World Jewish Congress virtual commemoration on the occasion of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. My name is Michaela Fuhrmann and I'm a member of the World Jewish Congress Jewish Diplomatic Corps. On this day, 76 years ago, the largest of the concentration and death camps, Auschwitz-Birkenau, was liberated. It marks the day when the full extent of the biggest crime against humanity became apparent to the world. It stands as a cruel demonstration of the atrocity that people can inflict on one another, on former colleagues, partners and friends. This day is a reminder of the fragility of democratic structures and moral values, and an appeal to future generations to ensure that the lessons of the Holocaust are never forgotten. I'm speaking to you today from the Holocaust Memorial Site Neuer Börneplatz in Frankfurt. Behind me you can see little blocks on a wall, each with a name that recalls a Frankfurt victim of the Shoah. Altogether 11,908 names. 11,908 lives that were annihilated just because they were Jewish and that form part of the 6 million Jewish lives that we mourn today. Once again we witness rising anti-Semitism throughout the world. Attacks on Jews and synagogues, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, online hate speech, Holocaust denial and distortion, as well as racism and xenophobia, are increasing and jeopardizing our democratic principles. The need to remember the past is more important than ever. The current terrible pandemic situation is regrettably impeding a commemoration at Auschwitz-Birkenau itself. But remembrance doesn't know any boundaries or distances, nor do common efforts and commitment to fight any kind of anti-Semitism and racism. As we pay tribute to all the victims of the Holocaust, we are united in our hearts wherever we are. I am honored to now call upon the President of the World Jewish Congress, Ambassador Ronald Lauder, for his remarks.
Thank you, Michaela. Distinguished speakers, Holocaust survivors and their families, dear friends, just 1 year ago I stood at the main gate of Auschwitz-Birkenau in front of thousands of people, including 200 survivors and their families, and the leaders of 50 countries. This was on the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Today, Auschwitz is empty, and we reconnect only virtually. But it is still vital that we do this in whatever form that's available. It is vital that we remember. You would think that after all this time, remembering might be easier, but it's not. With every passing year, the pain of loss grows with more intensity. During this pandemic year, we think of the pain of losing just one human life. How do we comprehend 6 million? We can't. What makes this especially hard is another number, the most horrific number of all. 1.5 million. That's the number of Jewish children killed by the Nazis. They would all be adults today that have lived full lives and had families. But also I wonder, what scientific advances, what symphonies and great works of literature were lost in these 1.5 million Jewish children? Perhaps even a cure for this pandemic that ravaged the globe. Because of this, there are things that we can do today. We can make sure that future generations know the lessons of this terrible event. I have devoted my life to education, to preserving the camps, and to make sure this never, ever happens again. Why is this important? Just look at the 12 months that just passed. A pandemic has swept across the entire world, and Jews are blamed for it. 76 years and 3 generations after World War II, the same old lies have resurfaced. That is why education about the Holocaust is so important, especially when so many young people have never even been told about what happened. That is why people must see what happened to the Jewish people during the Holocaust. That is why we must educate people every year, because the world needs reminding. And finally, we must teach our children to stand up and always defend the Jewish people with strong resolve, with commitment, and always with great pride. Thank you. We will now go directly to Auschwitz to hear from Piotr Cywinski, director of the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum, which has done such a great work in maintaining the integrity of the site. Piotr, we're all so grateful for what you have accomplished. Thank you very much.
Auschwitz was the core of the hatreds, of the contempt, of the exclusions, the dehumanization. Auschwitz was really the very core of the Holocaust. This is why the day of the liberation of Auschwitz was chosen by the United Nations as the International Day of this remembrance. Today we must remember, and we have to liberate our own imagination, because the remembrance of the Holocaust is not devoted to the past, or not only. Our memory must change our today world and our future. We are living in some very difficult times. Our democracies are suffering of demagogy and of populism. The xenophobia, the racism, the anti-Semitism are growing. More, our world is suffering of our own incapacity to react, our own passivity. Really, we are the bystanders of our times. This is why we need to remember. Because our future is starting now, in our dreams, our visions, our choices and decisions with our concrete responsibility.
My name is Tova Friedman, and I was liberated in Auschwitz. It is hard to believe that only 1 year ago, we, the Holocaust survivors and our families, met at Auschwitz to commemorate the 75th anniversary of our liberation. At the conference, we shared our stories, our memories, and our pain. We mourned the dead, and we remembered them, and we celebrate the survivors, and renewed our pledge to continue to educate the young and the old to the dangers of hatred and prejudice. Today, only a year later, life has changed drastically for all of us. Most of us live in isolation. Parents and grandparents cannot visit their children or their grandchildren. Siblings are distancing, and the elderly live alone in isolation and loneliness. We had to stand by helplessly as hundreds and thousands of people died, and more are still dying. We now realize how much we need each other spiritually, emotionally, physically, and financially. As scientists around the world are battling the deadly COVID-19 virus, we have to battle the virus of racism, the virus of hatred, and the virus of prejudice. The Holocaust was a culmination of these lethal viruses that caused the murder of innocent men and women, including 1.5 million children. I remember as a small child, at the age of 5.5, arriving in Auschwitz after spending 2 days in a cattle car without water, without food. And when I arrived, I was undressed. My head was shaved and my arm was tattooed. I was no longer a child. I was no longer a person. I was a 27,633. Today, as anti-Semitism is rearing its ugly head again, the voices of protests are not many and not loud enough. We, the Holocaust survivors, and our families must rededicate our mission and intensify our effort to educate people everywhere by speaking out, by writing, by protesting, by demonstrating everywhere, in schools, in places of worship, and in public arenas. We have to unify with the good people of this earth to stop spread this deadly virus, which may culminate, unless we stop it, in another human tragedy. And to ignore it is to open the gates to have it happen again. If the slogan, never again, is to be a reality, we have to be vigilant and stop this virus. In the name of the Holocaust survivors, I'd like to thank our mentor, our champion, our supporter and visionary, who has united us in this cause. Thank you, Ronald Lauder.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Friedman, for your very moving and inspirational words. It is you, the survivors, who taught us, the next generations, the meaning of resilience, strength and hope. Because of your emunah, your faith and your courage, Jewish life has risen from the ashes and is flourishing again, even here in Germany. We will remember your legacy and never let the world forget what you went through. We promise to do everything in our power to fight intolerance and injustice. We shall now hear messages from the President of Poland, His Excellency Mr. Andrzej Duda, and the President of the Federal Republic of Germany, His Excellency Dr. Frank-Walter Steinmeier.
Czcigodni ocaleni i świadkowie zagłady, ekscelencje, panie i panowie. 27 stycznia jest każdego roku Dniem Pamięci Ofiar Holokaustu. Dziś pamięć 6 milionów wymordowanych Żydów czci cała społeczność międzynarodowa. Tego dnia 76 lat temu został wyzwolony obóz Auschwitz-Birkenau. Jest on najważniejszym symbolem zagłady, bo był największą hitlerowską fabryką śmierci. Niemcy na okupowanej przez nich polskiej ziemi urządzili swój ludobójczy przemysł. Tutaj, w Auschwitz-Birkenau, ginęli Żydzi, Polacy, Roma i Sinti, jeńcy z Armii Czerwonej. Z głębokim wzruszeniem i zadumą wspominam zeszłoroczne uroczystości w miejscu pamięci na terenie niemieckiego nazistowskiego obozu koncentracyjnego i zagłady, gdzie zebrali się wówczas ostatni ocaleni i świadkowie Holokaustu z całego świata. W tym roku obchody wyglądają inaczej. To bezprecedensowa sytuacja, gdy światowa pandemia koronawirusa uniemożliwia nam bezpośrednie spotkanie. Ale jest to też ważny znak, który przypomina, że zawsze, bez względu na okoliczności, musimy wypełniać powinność świadków pamięci i strażników prawdy o Holokauście. Żyjemy w czasach, gdy rzeczywistość wirtualna współistnieje ze światem realnym, a niekiedy nawet próbuje go zastąpić. Dzięki nowoczesnej technologii możemy w obecnych warunkach razem czcić pamięć ofiar. Ale tegoroczne uroczystości uświadamiają nam też z wyjątkową mocą znaczenie materialnych dowodów ludobójstwa i jego straszliwą realność. Zbrodnie popełnione w niemieckich obozach koncentracyjnych i zagłady były realne. Prawdziwi ludzie cierpieli tutaj niewyobrażalny, ale realny ból. I naprawdę umierali. I naprawdę byli mordowani. Cierpienie i śmierć ofiar były, są i pozostaną realne. Naszą powinnością jest zachować wszelkie materialne dowody, pamiątki i znaki ich istnienia, życia i męczeństwa po to, żeby ludzkość nigdy o nich nie zapomniała, żeby nigdy nie zapomniano o tym, co wydarzyło się tu w Auschwitz i w innych miejscach niemieckich zbrodni. Władze Rzeczypospolitej wypełniają misję zachowania dowodów tej największej zbrodni w dziejach ludzkości. Kiedy minie zagrożenie śmiertelną chorobą, znów staniemy w Auschwitz-Birkenau, na ziemi przesyconej krwią ponad 1 miliona ofiar. To, co można tutaj zobaczyć, jest odpowiedzią na zapomnienie, na ułudę nierealności, na kłamstwo negacjonizmu. Pamięć i prawda o Holokauście będą trwać wiecznie. My, współcześni, poniesiemy w przyszłość i przekażemy następnym pokoleniom przesłanie płynące z tego miejsca. Nigdy więcej Auschwitz, nigdy więcej ludobójstwa, nienawiści i rasizmu.
Aus der Vergangenheit lernen, die Zukunft schützen. Deutschland will diesem Anspruch gerecht werden. Wir wollen nicht vergessen, was geschehen ist, und wir werden nicht vergessen, was geschehen kann. Deswegen liegt mir auch in diesem Jahr daran, mit der Gedenkveranstaltung des World Jewish Congress und des Staatlichen Museums Auschwitz-Birkenau an die Opfer der Shoah zu erinnern. Auch wenn wir das in diesen von der Pandemie bestimmten Tagen nur virtuell tun können, ist uns das gemeinsame Gedenken nicht weniger wichtig. Wir tun es, um der Opfer zu gedenken, aber wir tun es auch für eine gemeinsame Zukunft. Es ist eine Pflicht, aber auch eine Verantwortung. Wir übernehmen sie von jenen, die den Schrecken noch erlebt haben und deren Stimmen weniger werden. Die größte Gefahr für uns alle geht vom Vergessen aus. Davon, dass wir uns nicht mehr daran erinnern, was wir einander antun, wenn wir Antisemitismus und Rassismus in unserer Mitte dulden. Wir müssen unsere Sinne wachhalten, Vorurteile und Verschwörungstheorien erkennen und ihnen mit Vernunft, Leidenschaft und Entschiedenheit entgegentreten. Ein jeder von uns ist aufgerufen, jüdische Mitbürgerinnen und Mitbürger vor Bedrohungen, Beleidigungen und Gewalt zu schützen. Nicht in Zukunft, sondern hier und heute in dem Land, in dem wir gemeinsam leben. Ich will Ihnen versichern, wir werden nicht zurückweichen. Wir werden weiter gegen Antisemitismus, Rassismus und Menschenfeindlichkeit kämpfen. Das Gedenken an die Opfer der Shoah übersetzt sich für die Zukunft in ein Niemals wieder. Darin liegt unsere Verantwortung die bleibt.
Vielen Dank, Herr Bundespräsident. Elie Wiesel, Zichrono Levracha, once said, "The opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference." So let us not be indifferent. We must not be indifferent. We must not be silent when it comes to anti-Semitism, racism, and incitement. We are all responsible to learn from history and to act accordingly. We cannot change the past, but we can create a better and safer future. To close, I am honored to call upon the President of the State of Israel, His Excellency Mr. Reuven Rivlin, following which we will hear in Mola Rachamim recited by Cantor Avner Fish in Israel.
President of the Federal Republic of Germany, Dr. Frank Walter Steinmeier, President of the Republic of Poland, Andrzej Duda, President of the World Jewish Congress, Ronald Lauder. Dear friends, the Jewish people is a people that remembers the past. However, our duty is not only to remember the past, but to remind the whole world the lessons of history in order to build a better future. That is why 1 year ago I undertook a historic journey. From gathering of more than 50 world leaders in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, I flew to Auschwitz-Birkenau to mark 75 years to the liberation of the camp, and from there to Berlin to address the Bundestag. All along this journey, I spoke of the urgent need to preserve Holocaust memory and to combat all forms of anti-Semitism and racism. Today, more than ever, we must never forget our duty to preserve Holocaust memory and continue our fight against anti-Semitism and hatred. I want to thank the World Jewish Congress and the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum for all your work around the world to preserve the past and to protect the future. Let us all work together to ensure that the shared promise we made last year in Jerusalem, Poland, and Germany, the promise of never again, becomes a shared reality. Thank you. Thank you, every one of you and all of you. And God may bless all of you.
למלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, אמצי מנוחה נכונה, על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את כל הנשמות של 6 מיליוני היהודים חללי השואה באירופה, שנהרגו, שנשחטו, שנשרפו ושנספו על קידוש השם. בידי המרצחים הגרמנים ועוזריהם משאר עמים, בעבור שכל הקהל מתפלל לעילוי נשמותיהם. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, בגן עדן תמנוחתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם, ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ ימין, ונאמר אמן.
Join the We Remember campaign for International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Together, we can ensure that the past is never forgotten.